But maybe I will shoot it individually, but in post-production, I'm gonna mostly...
Or do you want to do anything?
I want to do yeah, might be a bit too much.
My name is Arnold Korashigi. I am a professor here at UTSC in the Arts, Culture, Media program, specified in new media and photo, and I am 54 years old. He said, why are we dealing with this? Well, this is 4x5. Like, why are we dealing with this ratio? I think my first introduction to film was in grade 9. So that would have been in the early 1980s, and I took a film course. And I fell in love with it right away. Just the immediacy of making pictures in this kind of new way. I'd never done anything before like that, so that really was what it grabbed onto me. So it would be in the early 1980s.
My name is David. I'm 24, and I run and operate a film lab in Toronto called C41 Film Labs. I started shooting film about 5 to 7 years ago. I started shooting as a hobbyist. I was originally shooting digitally, as most of my generation was shooting, and then I found out that my favorite photographers shoot on film. So I decided to give it a shot, and I fell in love with film, and I've been shooting film ever since.
Well, film is specifically what they call silver halides that are suspended on a piece of plastic, and it's called an emulsion. And the silver halides, the way they work is that where light hits them, they change when they get processed into different forms, being black or white. And that's how film is exposed by light. You've heard these terms before, maybe, that this exposure changes the crystals.
For film, you're not able to save the shadows as much as you're able to save them with a digital camera, because in film, you're shooting on color negative most of the time. And because it is a negative, that means if you don't have any detail in the shadow, you cannot get that back when you're scanning the film. That's why you want to retain as much detail in the shadow, and it would be better if you were able to overexpose by half a stop or a stop, just to make sure that you retain that info in the shadow.
Stop there. Good. Let's try it again. 3, 2, 1.
My first digital camera was a Canon ELPH. It was around 2003, and it was spectacular. I could take many pictures, I could review them and play them back on the camera and share them immediately. I fell in love with the economy of shooting, not having to do all the work, and it was obviously free. It was a beautiful little silver metal camera, so it emulated the sort of cameras of old. But at the same time, when I started to realize that they could only be shared with other people who had computers, I realized maybe something was a little bit different than what I was used to in terms of film.
Growing up until I was 6 or 7 years old, my family captured all the moments on film until digital cameras came out. My dad bought a digital camera with a simple Canon point and shoot. He started shooting and photographing our family on that camera.
I think the difference between an analog film camera and a digital camera specifically is this idea of sharing, the ability for people to immediately distribute images. Also, film cameras for the most part required a certain amount of knowledge in terms of equipment or privilege to get that equipment, whereas digital photography made it very democratic. Anybody could take a picture, anybody could share a picture. So that was the sort of most important thing that I realized when I started shooting digitally.
Immediately when digital cameras started coming out, people stopped shooting film, thinking they will be able to save more money and on time. You'll be able to see the photo on the back of the camera immediately, and people were more interested in that.
As you may know by now, Kodak is in the midst of bankruptcy.
About Kodak getting all its paperwork ready, typing away. They thought they were in the film business, but they were actually in the images business.
Its future will now be about printers and software and packaging.
This morning in Rochester, Kodak imploded one of its buildings on the company's campus.
And how much do we even print anymore? Everything's done electronically. You could check in on things on your phone, and that's a declining market as well.
My name is Claudia Mack. I'm the assistant manager and I oversee the analog offerings at Downtown Camera. So ironically, Kodak was the first one to introduce a digital camera. It was about 4 kilograms, so that's about 10 pounds. It was very big. The screen was very hard to look at and it was definitely not portable. And now we have better memory cards, better computer screens, better internet. So all these things played a factor into, making digital photography more accessible. If you compare this to, at that point in time, shooting a roll of film, you would have to 36 exposures versus 100 plus on a memory card. You don't have to go to your developer to go get it developed anymore. You would be able to see your images. You have instant feedback of the image that you took. So these things are some factors that I think did play into the whole scheme of things.
Well, being an educator, I saw the impact of digital photography, specifically on analog photography, when it became very difficult for us to purchase equipment for students to work with. We saw that with digital photography, everybody was navigating to new cameras, new equipment, and a lot of people weren't interested in investing in film, which was limited at the time and became even more limited. So for me, finding film stock, for instance, that I preferred in the 1980s or 90s, to actually find out that it was no longer manufactured was really quite shocking, and something that it affected me quite a bit.
A big part of the death of film was labs closing down, and that was a serious problem as smaller labs in cities started closing down. Then there was one big lab in most cities, so there would be one big lab, and then people started to think, oh, maybe film is dead now. People started to sell their cameras. People started to sell their film cameras online for a cheap price in around 2011 to 2015. So that was a big part of the death of film.
The reason why I started shooting a lot on digital is because the limitation on film. Because every time I shoot on film, I have to worry about how many shots I can get. Like, it's usually around 27 or 36 shots, but that's about it, right? Then you need to go in another roll. But in digital, I don't have to worry about it. Well, one simple reason. I can just do that. I don't have to worry about how many photos I can take on a digital, because that really depending on the memory card.
For wedding photographers, the only option was film photography. It was very popular. They were shooting a lot of film. When digital came out, they started to find out that, hey, there's this other option that I can see my photos immediately. And that started to bring down the number of film wedding photographers, and more digital wedding photographers started to come into play. Wedding photographers that were shooting on film started selling their film cameras, stopped shooting on film, started shooting on digital to save money, to see their photos immediately, to make sure that their exposure is correct.
My name is Winnie. I'm a wedding photographer in Toronto, and I'm also an analog film enthusiast. I think shooting with film camera slows down the photography process, which allows me to interact with the camera, manually set all the settings, and take my time to enjoy the moment. In my spare time, I prefer to use my film camera better than digital camera because I can hang out with my friends. There is the analog film enthusiast community, which I can make many friends, and we hang out once in a while and to do some photo walk to share our thoughts on photography.
I think film cameras have become interesting to younger generations recently because of the nostalgic aspect. There seems to be something that they weren't part of, so they want to explore it, but also because of the quality of the image and the way that it creates an image. The image is not defined in pixels or through a grid. Things are a little bit more ambiguous. There's a little bit of more room for failure. I think film has a vulnerability that I think that people appreciate, and that I think at one point we were all sort of striving for higher resolution and sharper images. And I think that digital photography offers those things exponentially better than analog. But at the same time, I think that people are realizing that there's merit in some of the aspects within film, specifically out of focus elements or grain or ideas around failure like processing and variation. So I think that's one of the sort of key ideas that I have noticed of the recent increase in interest in film.
The best way for me to explain it is my analogy, because I have a cooking background, a restaurant background. I would say it's cooking at a fire pit versus cooking on a stove. So fire pit would be film photography, a stove would be a digital photography. So everybody has a stove now. Everybody likes the convenience of it, but every now and then you might like a good barbecue, right? So so a lot of people also tell me that they like the experience, they like the challenge, they also even like the limits. They like the fact that they don't see what they're shooting, and because of that, I think there's might be some sort of absence makes the heart grow fonder. You didn't see your image, and then when you got the shot, you're really happy about it, and there's that sense of accomplishment. Because shooting film, you're looking at the core of photography. You have to know some principles also, and sometimes it just happens and it's magic.
Film still exists because it has existed for over 120 years. Film never went away. It did lose some popularity, but over the last 4 to 5 years, from around the beginning of 2016, film has been making a huge comeback, mainly pushed through YouTube photographers that are more educating people on film, showing people what film could look like. Nowadays, I choose to shoot on film because I love the look, I love the end result that film produces. Even when you try to edit your digital photos to make them look like film, you can never get close to the tangible results of film.
There's lots of challenges for us as an industry. I think even for consumers, because the costs are going up. This film photography needs volume, and it needs a lot of parts for it to work. So, for example, chemistry. At one point in time, we weren't able to get chemistry for our processing. So, we were worried about that. But then it was okay. Somebody saved that company, saved Kodak from, bankruptcy. So then you start looking at the cost of film, making film. All the raw materials are getting expensive. So that incurs who's going to pay those costs. We, for ourselves, even the machines. So there's not too many places in the world that are making film processing machines. So the machines that we have are the last. So we don't know how long we can keep on, have the parts, have the ability to maintain it. Even the motherboard on the film processing chip, when it dies, we don't know who we can go get it repaired with. All the people retired. Even the companies have said, we're not going to support this machine anymore. So we're really by ourselves. So now, what else is another threat is the actual cameras itself. So right now the cameras are getting older. There's no new film cameras that are affordable anymore. So when you add up all these things, there's lots of challenges that the film photography has to overcome, to have it last for a long time.
Film means a lot to me. It's a very old format of photographing, and it means a lot to me that it doesn't disappear. I would love to see more people shooting film. I would love to see more community-based projects around cities where they're introducing film to new photographers and igniting that passion in new photographers. I believe the future of film will be just as it's going right now. It's going to keep getting more popular. A lot of people that haven't had the chance to try out shooting on film are getting that opportunity now because film is making a comeback. There's more cameras available on the market. It's only fair if everyone gets at least a chance to try it out. I really hope that it never disappears out of the market in general.
A 档，来，快把你撞死！可爱的小姐姐，哇，小小的小姐姐，哇，小姐姐翘住。